Hello students, welcome back to Daily Current Affairs Analysis by Civic Center IAS, where we shall discuss important relevant articles in the UPSC CSE prelims perspective, displayed are the topics which we'll be discussing today. Well, let's begin. The first article says that the National Health Mission has significantly contributed to improving India's public health, including lowering of maternal mortality ratio, incidence of tuberculosis, and sickle cell anemia. In this context, let's discuss briefly about the National Health Mission. See, the National Health Mission was launched in the year 2013 with the aim to provide accessible, affordable and quality healthcare to all the citizens, especially the underserved populations. Furthermore, the NHM integrates two key missions. First is the National Rural Health Mission launched in the year 2005 and the National Urban Health Mission launched in the year 2013. Together, these missions focus on strengthening health systems and enhancing reproductive, maternal, neonatal, child and adolescent health. Additionally, they address both communicable and non-communicable diseases. Now, let's dive into the key components of the National Health Mission. First, the National Rural Health Mission works towards improving healthcare services in rural areas by emphasizing essential medical facilities and community participation. On the other hand, the National Urban Health Mission addresses the unique health needs of urban populations by enhancing healthcare infrastructure in cities and towns. In addition, the National Health Mission implements national disease control programs to tackle major health challenges such as malaria, tuberculosis, HIV or AIDS, and other vector-borne diseases. Notably, it also includes initiatives like the Janani Suraksha Yojana, which reduces maternal and infant mortality by promoting institutional deliveries and providing financial support to the pregnant women. Furthermore, under the NHM, several transformative initiatives have been introduced, including Janani Shishu Suraksha Karyakramam, Rashtriya Bal Swasthata Karyakramam, the Free Drugs and Free Diagnostic Services initiatives, the PM National Dialysis Program, the National Quality Assurance Framework, the Ayushman Bharat Scheme, and many more. And each of these initiatives targets specific challenges to ensure comprehensive healthcare services for all. Now, let's look at the milestones achieved under the National Health Mission. See, over the years, the NHM has significantly strengthened India's healthcare systems by reducing maternal and child mortality, expanding health infrastructure, controlling the communicable diseases, promoting health insurance schemes like the Ayushman Bharat, and which have been expanded to insurance coverage, reducing the financial burden on the vulnerable populations. Moreover, the NHM has empowered women and the communities through the initiatives like the Janani Suraksha Yojana, which encourages the institutional deliveries and by involving communities in healthcare decision making. Well, the second article says that the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has fixed the minimum support price of raw jute for the 2025-2026 marketing season at Rs 5,650 a quintal, an increase of Rs 315 over the price in the year 2024-2025. Well, in this context, let's discuss briefly about the MSP and also about the jute. To begin with, let's understand what MSP is all about. Essentially, the minimum support price, in short the MSP, is a guaranteed amount paid to the farmers when the government procures their produce. MSP is determined based on the recommendations of the Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices. Moreover, the CACP, that is the Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices, considers factors such as cost of production, demand and supply, market price trends, intercrop price parity. And remember that the CACP is an attached office of the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare. And finally, the CCEA, that is the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, chaired by the Prime Minister, takes the final decision on the MSPs. Moving on, the primary aim of MSP is to ensure remunerative prices for the farmers, protect them from the price fluctuations and encourage the crop diversification. Currently, the Centre fixes MSP for 23 farm commodities, and these include several cereals like the paddy, wheat, maize, bajra, jowar, ragi and barley, along with the 5 pulses, that is the chana dal, tur dal, urad dal, moong dal and masoor dal. Additionally, the 7 oil seeds, that is the rapeseed or mustard, groundnut, soya bean, sunflower, sesame, safflower and niger seed, and also the 4 commercial crops, that is the cotton, sugarcane, copra and the raw jute, based on the CACP's recommendations. Now, let's focus on the jute. Jute, which is a crop of immense importance, and it is a natural vegetable fiber classified under the bast fibers like the flax and the hemp. Moving further, the favorable conditions for the jute cultivation include temperature. It is around between 25 to 35 degrees Celsius, rainfall around 150 to 250 centimeters, and the soil type should be the well-drained alluvial soil. And when it comes to the production, India is the largest producer of jute, followed by the Bangladesh and China. However, in terms of acreage and trade, Bangladesh leads, accounting for the 3/4 of the global jute exports compared to India's 7% share. And in India, jute cultivation is primarily concentrated in the eastern regions thanks to the fertile alluvial soil of the Ganga and Brahmaputra Delta. And know that the major jute producing states in India include West Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, Assam, Andhra Pradesh, Meghalaya and Tripura. Lastly, let's talk about the Jute Corporation of India Limited. Know that Jute Corporation of India Limited was established in the year 1971 by the Government of India. Significantly, its primary mandate is to procure raw jute and mesta at the minimum support price declared annually by the government based on the recommendations from the Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices. Moving forward to the third article, it says that the Employees Provident Fund organization enrolled around 8.74 lakh new members last November, registering an 18.8% rise from the figure in the corresponding period in the year 2023, according to the Union Labour Ministry. Well, in this context, let's discuss briefly about the Employees Provident Fund organization, in short, the EPFO. Know that it is a statutory body that came existence under the Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act of the year 1952. And it is also the nodal agency for implementing bilateral social security agreements with the other countries. Further, it is one of the largest social security organizations in India, both in the terms of beneficiary base and the quantum of financial transactions undertaken. Remember that the EPFO is under the administrative control of the Ministry of Labour and Employment. Now, moving to the next article, it says that the principal bench of the National Green Tribunal on Wednesday directed the Uttar Pradesh government to place on record in 4 weeks the status of notifying the Dhanauri water body near Jewar Airport as a wetland. Well, in this context, let's discuss various aspects like Dhanauri wetlands and also see what is meant by wetlands and also talk about the Ramsar site. To begin with, let's take a closer look at the Dhanauri wetlands. These wetlands are situated near Dhanauri village in Uttar Pradesh, approximately 15 kilometers north of Noida International Airport. Significantly, it is recognized as an important bird area by the BirdLife International, documented by the Bombay Natural History Society. Additionally, the wetlands are bordered by Dhanauri in the northwest, Tasrana in the east, and Aminpur Bangar to the southeast. Also, ecologically, the Dhanauri wetlands are home to diverse species like state bird of Uttar Pradesh, which is the Sarus crane, with over 120 Sarus cranes inhabiting the area. Additionally, the wetlands support a wide range of bird species, making them an haven for bird watchers and conservationists. But what exactly is a wetland? Well, according to the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, wetlands are defined as areas of marsh, fen, peatland or water, whether natural or artificial, permanent or temporary. They include water that is static or flowing, fresh, brackish or salt. Interestingly, they also cover areas of marine water with depths of up to 6 meters at a low tide. And simply put, wetlands are transitional zones between the terrestrial and aquatic areas, making them unique ecosystem. Now, let's discuss the Ramsar Convention. See, it is an intergovernmental treaty signed in the year 1971 in Ramsar, Iran, and it is aimed at protecting and conserving wetlands worldwide. Furthermore, India joined the convention in the year 1982, initially designating two sites. One is the Chilka Lake in Odisha and Keoladio National Park in the Rajasthan. Now, moving ahead to the next article, it says that the US Secretary of the State, Marco Rubio, held his first multilateral meeting on Tuesday as the foreign ministers of the Quad grouping, India, US, Australia, and Japan, gathered in the Washington, D.C. and vowed to strongly oppose any unilateral actions that seek to change the status quo by force or coercion. A statement aimed at China's assertive behavior in the Indo-Pacific region. Well, in this context, let's talk about the Quad. Quad, known as a Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, is an informal strategic forum comprising the four nations, namely Australia, India, Japan, and the USA. As these four countries shared the common interest in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific, promoting democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, and also countering China's expanding influence in the region. Interestingly, Quad was first proposed by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in the year 2007 during an informal meeting of leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that is the ASEAN. Now moving on, the Quad operates on several guiding principles. First, its primary goal is to keep the strategic sea routes in the Indo-Pacific free from the military or the political dominance. Second, it serves as a strategic grouping to counterbalance China's growing dominance in the region. Third, the core objective of the Quad is to ensure a rules-based global order and also freedom of navigation and a liberal trading system. Finally, the Quad also aims to provide alternative debt financing options for nations in the Indo-Pacific region, offering them an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, let's see how the Quad operates. See, unlike the formal alliances like NATO, the Quad is a loose grouping without a decision-making body, a secretariat, or a formal structure. But instead, it functions through summits, meetings, information exchanges, and joint military drills, which symbolize the unity and diplomatic cohesion of the Quad nations. Importantly, the Quad does not include provisions for collective defense, which differentiates it from the alliances like the NATO, but rather it focuses on building unity through military exercises and shared strategic objectives. Moving ahead to the next article, it says that the Union Cabinet on Wednesday reviewed the progress under the National Health Mission over the last 3 years and was informed that with significant progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, India is on the track to meet its health targets well ahead of the 2030 deadline. Well, in this context, let's discuss about the Sustainable Development Goals and health. Know that the Sustainable Development Goals, in short the SDGs, adopted by United Nations in the year 2015, emphasizes health through the Goal 3, that is the ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all the ages. And this goal interlinks with other SDGs to address global health challenges comprehensively. Well, now let's take a closer look at how India is progressing towards the SDG 3. Well, as a part of it, the key initiatives driving this progress include the National Health Mission, which is strengthening healthcare delivery in both the urban and the rural areas. Along with that, Ayushman Bharat, which provides health insurance to economically weaker sections, ensuring access to quality healthcare. Further, Mission Indradhanush, which is expanding vaccination coverage to reduce the child mortality, and also the targeted programs which are focused on reducing non-communicable diseases and improving mental health. Moving on, India has made remarkable progress in maternal and child health. as the maternal mortality ratio declined from 130 in the year 2014-2015 to 97 in the year 2018 to 2020, which is a 25% of reduction. Since the year 1990, the MMR, that is the maternal mortality ratio, has decreased by 83%, exceeding the global average decline of 45%. And under 5 mortality rate, it was reduced from 45 to 32 per thousand live births. Further, the infant mortality ratio declined from 39 to 28 per thousand live births. And in addition, India has achieved significant progress in controlling various diseases such as tuberculosis, malaria, Kala Azar, dengue, leprosy, viral hepatitis, and the launch of the National Sickle Cell Anemia Elimination Mission as a new initiative to address the genetic blood disorders. Furthermore, vaccination campaigns have played a pivotal role in improving public health. For instance, the measles rubella vaccination campaign achieved an impressive 97.9% coverage of the target population, showcasing the effectiveness of India's immunization programs. Lastly, India's healthcare workforce have been significantly strengthened. In the last 3 years, 5.23 lakh healthcare workers have been added, enhancing the delivery of the healthcare services across the country. And this expansion ensures better access to care, especially in the underserved regions. Well, moving to the next article, it says that the 15th National Voters' Day will be celebrated across the country on 25th of January. And this year's celebration comes soon after the historic and successful conduct of 2024 Lok Sabha elections, which is the largest democratic exercise in the world. And also, the Election Commission celebrates 75 years of its dedicated service to the nation. Well, in this context, let's talk about the National Voters' Day. To start with, the National Voters' Day is celebrated every year on January 25, marking the foundation day of the Election Commission of India, which is established in the year 2011. This day is dedicated to commemorating the creation of the Election Commission on January 25, 1950, just a day before India became Republic. Now, let's understand the purpose behind celebrating National Voters' Day. First, it celebrates voters and their crucial role in democracy. Second, it aims to promote electoral awareness and participation, ensuring that every eligible citizen exercises their voting rights. Finally, it encourages the enrollment of new voters, especially the youth, to strengthen the India's democratic fabric. Moving on, this year we celebrate 15th National Voters' Day, and particularly it is special because of its historic context and key achievements. To begin with, this year's celebration follows the successful conduct of 2024 Lok Sabha elections, which is recognized as the largest democratic exercise in the world. Moreover, the Election Commission is also celebrating 75 years of its dedicated service to the nation. And when it comes to India's electorate, the numbers speak the volumes. Currently, the total electorate is nearly the 100 crore mark, with an electoral database of 99.1 crore voters. Interestingly, youth participation is at an all-time high, with 21.7 crore young voters aged 18 to 29 contributing to the democratic progress. In addition, India has made significant strides in improving gender balance in voting. The electoral gender ratio, which stood at 948 in the year 2024, has improved to 954 in the year 2025, reflecting greater inclusivity in the electoral process. Now, let's talk about this year's theme. This year's theme is Nothing Like Voting, I Vote for Sure. And this theme is a continuation from last year, emphasizes the importance of voting and encourages citizens to take pride in participating in elections. Furthermore, it serves as a reminder of the vital role as the every voter plays in shaping the nation's future. Moving forward to the next article, it says that as India accelerates its transition towards a sustainable future, its renewable energy sector has witnessed unprecedented growth. As in the year 2024, the country made significant strides in solar and wind energy installations, policy advancements, and infrastructural improvements, setting the stage for ambitious target for the 2025. Well, in this context, let's take a closer look at the India's renewable energy sector growth. To begin with, India's renewable energy sector has made significant progress, particularly in the solar and wind energy, positioning the country as a global leader in the clean energy transition. Importantly, the developments in 2024 have laid a solid foundation for achieving India's ambitious goal of 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel based energy capacity by the year 2030. Now, let's take a closer look at the key milestones achieved in the year 2024. First, let's talk about India's total non-fossil fuel-based energy capacity. As of January 20, 2025, India's total capacity reached 217.62 gigawatts, with solar energy and wind power being the major contributors to this growth. Next, the solar energy has been a driving force in India's clean energy transition. As in the year 2024, 24.5 gigawatts of solar capacity was added, more than doubling the growth compared to the year 2023. And of this, 18.5 gigawatts of utility scale solar capacity was installed, marking a 2.8x increase from the year 2023. Remarkably, solar energy contributed 47% of India's total renewable energy capacity. Leading states such as Rajasthan, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu accounted for 71% of utility-scale solar installations. Now, moving on to the wind energy, in the year 2024, 3.4 gigawatts of new wind capacity was added, reflecting a 21% increase compared to 2023. And the leading contributors were Gujarat, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, which together accounted for 98% of the new wind capacity. In addition, rooftop solar saw the remarkable growth as 4.59 gigawatts of rooftop solar capacity was installed, a 53% of increase from the year 2023. Along with the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, which was launched in the year 2024, it played a significant role in facilitating 7 lakh rooftop installations in just 10 months. Furthermore, the off-grid solar segment grew by 182%, adding 1.48 gigawatts in the year 2024, which significantly supported energy access in the rural areas. Meanwhile, several government initiatives and policies have accelerated the renewable energy transition. First, the push for the green hydrogen development aimed to reduce cost and attract investments in these emerging sectors. Second, there was a significant focus on domestic solar PV and wind turbine manufacturing to establish India as a global renewable energy manufacturing hub. Third, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy proposed investments in interstate transmission systems to evacuate power from renewable-rich states like the Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Madhya Pradesh. Lastly, the policy support and financial incentives introduced by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy boosted large-scale renewable energy projects across the country. Looking ahead, India's renewable energy sector is gearing up for more ambitious targets, as by the year 2030, India aims to achieve 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel-based energy capacity, and this focus will remain on expanding solar and wind energy while promoting emerging technologies like the green hydrogen. However, addressing the infrastructural challenges, implementing the regulatory reforms, and ensuring the financial support will be critical for achieving these goals. Well, the last article of the day says that amid the global race to develop hypersonic munitions, the Defense Research and Development Organization, that is DRDO, recently demonstrated a cutting-edge, active, cooled scramjet combustor ground test for 120 seconds for the first time in India. The successful ground test marks a crucial milestone in developing next-generation hypersonic missiles, according to the Ministry of Defense. Well, In this context, let's talk about the hypersonic missiles. Know that a hypersonic missile is a weapon system that travels at a speed at least Mach 5, that is 5 times the speed of the sound. And it is maneuverable unlike the ballistic missiles which follow a fixed ballistic trajectory. And if you look at the key characteristics, first, it travels at a hypersonic speeds, that is Mach 5 or the above. Second, it can adjust its course mid-flight to target precisely. Lastly, it doesn't follow a predictable arc like the ballistic missiles. Next, let's look at the two main types of the hypersonic weapons. First, we have the hypersonic glide vehicles, that is with a launch mechanism deployed from a rocket, and it glides towards the intended target after being launched. Second, we have the hypersonic cruise missiles, which is powered by the air-breathing scramjets, and it acquires the target and maintains sustained hypersonic speeds during the flight. Now that we have understood the types of hypersonic systems, now let's dive deeper into the critical role of scramjets in this hypersonic technology. To begin with, the scramjet engine or the supersonic combustion ramjet is an air-breathing engine that sustains combustion at the hypersonic speeds. Unlike the traditional jet engines, a scramjet engine does not have rotating compressors or turbines. Instead, it relies on the high-speed airflow created by the vehicle's motion to compress air for the combustion. And for this reason, scramjet engines are ideal for powering hypersonic vehicles. Well, that's end the sessions today. And we have covered 9 articles for the day, and we'll be back tomorrow with the other current affairs video. Thank you.